was just do some. Oh wow, getting a lot of. Just do some introductions. Justin is here, and Justin Wheat is going to help us out this summer. So I just wanted to introduce him to everyone working on policies and telemetry, and give him a second maybe to say hello. He'll probably be showing up and asking you lots of questions as he works on some of this summer. So Justin, did you want to say hi?
Hi everyone.
Great.
Welcome, Justin.
Yeah.
If you have any questions for me, please reach out on Slack or email. I'll make sure I answer them.
Definitely, I appreciate it.
And then I just want to spend a couple minutes. Hold on, just a second.
Looks like Doug's dog wants to join the meeting too.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Everyone's fired up over here today, apparently. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that for 1.7, I have gone ahead and added epics and tracking bugs for all of our issues on the roadmap. So now we should be able to track all the work items. So if you've seen a bunch of activity recently from me, that's what that's about. So please, as you're working through things, refer to those issues, provide updates on those issues, and I can use that in the working group leads meetings and other meetings to help us track progress throughout the course. That makes sense? Is everyone okay with that? Okay, and then the next thing I had wanted to talk about was one of our P0s was to develop the final actionable plan for mixer removal. So I've shared that document here. I've tried to document every single place mixer shows up in our code bases. So this is supposed to be a comprehensive list. I may have missed a few spots. But I wanted to go over and make sure that my plan is still the plan that we all agree on, which is basically total removal of all things mixer and not trying to copy it over to a separate repo or capturing it anywhere else. And so we'll just rely on having it stored in the release branches from previous releases, but nothing forward. Does that make sense to the group?
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, we have GitHub or we have Git, so let's just use it. I'm getting a lot of echo.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Okay, great. I think the only interesting bit there is if there's anything that lives in the where is it? In the Mixer plugin package, we need to make sure that we move that to a more appropriate place. So I don't know if we added some of the black
Mixer.
hole.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Can you explain that again? What did you say? What's in Mixer plugin and why is it special?
It's the pilot plugin. It's the part of the code that runs in pilot that used to configure the mixer filter. And then we may have added other things like Doug is saying, which were not exactly related to mixer. So yeah. So someone will have to, whenever that specific thing is done, someone will have to make sure that things are moved to the right place. The wiki was so what's the
following your comments, I proposed to add a new docs folder in the Mixer subpackage and then cherry pick that back a couple branches with those pages.
Okay.
And just remove them from the wiki. Although I'm not sure, I don't have permissions to remove pages from the wiki, but I think we can figure out how to do that. And that would just clean up the wiki. There wouldn't be a whole mixer
Right. Yeah.
subset of pages on the wiki.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
Okay. Well, if we think that this is good enough, then I will say it's approved, and we can take it to the DSC.
So, Doug, this is the technical piece of this initiative of clearing out Mixer, and then I think we need to work on the communication plan or something like that, right? Or is that simply going to be, it's deprecated, move on to Telemetry V2?
Well, I mean, it deprecated 2 releases ago. I think that so I think that the short answer, Neeraj, is that yes, I think we do need a communication plan. It's not we need to send out the communication that this is happening maybe a month before it actually happens. So that would be kind of around the time when 1.7 releases or slightly before. We should say, okay, right afterwards this is going to happen. So just an FYI. So maybe we should just add that section to this doc.
Okay. We already had a blog post about Mixer deprecation, right?
Right. So this will just document the next steps in like what we will communicate and when.
Can't we actually start once they branch 1.7? Or because it says to wait until they release.
I think what I meant, well, if it said wait until the release, what I meant was as soon as the branch is cut,
okay,
you can go ahead and, following the release, following the release branch.
Yeah, that makes sense. We should enlist John Howard for this. He's really good at removing a lot of code now.
Well, John, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was going to be a well thought after task to do, but if no one wants to do it, I'm happy to delete everything.
Well, so part of the reason I tried to capture every single spot it is I was trying to make it easy for whomever wants to come, whoever has the time and inclination can just start knocking them all out.
Yeah, this is very, very thorough and useful. It's a great job. But you are missing who's planning the mixer removal party as part of the plan.
Okay, yes, I'll add that to the document as well. Party planner.
Is there some nostalgia or, I mean, I know you and like Doug and Mandar, you have been working on this from the very first Istio release, right?
Yeah, and from before then too. We'll have to get Martin back and
oh yeah,
Martin and Zach.
That makes sense. Yeah, I remember the early meetings. Martin used to be there all the time.
Okay. Well, I think that covers that. Unless anyone else has anything else they want to share. The next item I had added to the agenda was someone from the community raised the issue that our request total doesn't include requests in flight. And that's sort of by design at the moment. But I was wondering what we think about supporting that use case and how we think we might do that. So I just wanted to raise that for discussion.
So I think that's an interesting use case, so for a normal HTTP flow, when the request is expected to be shortish lived, it's not that big of a problem. But I guess this is more important for like really long-lived requests. Right? Is that like what was the?
I can open the bug. Let me open the bug. That'll probably.
So Mandar, irrespective of the use case, in my opinion, I don't think we can change the semantic meaning of the current metric.
No, we cannot. So if we want, we can add a new gauge or something, or gauge count or something like that that says how many requests are in flight.
Yeah, it would have to be a new metric or something. It can't possibly be applied to what's already there.
It's going to break a bunch of integrations. Thank you. I think that's fine if you want to add a new one as a gauge. Long back when we used to export all Envoy metrics, there used to be a metric for this, I remember. An Envoy metric, yeah.
Okay, so we think we should support this, and this is valid. I think we all agree that it has to be a new metric.
Yep.
I think it's valid. I don't know if it's useful to a lot of people. I don't know.
Yeah, we should ask what is the person going to do with that? Like, is he trying to understand his queue depths kind of thing?
I thought that was what was behind it. Talking about running an experiment and just not seeing all of the requests, but I don't know if that's a practical concern or not. So we can follow up.
It could be useful if you have like long-lived requests, right?
Yeah. Certainly, we added support in TCP for counting bytes in flight for connections, for long-lived connections. So there's precedent for that, at least, sort of.
I see. And will it also now the question is about pendings? Is that going to be another gauge, or
I guess in-flight is pending, right? Are you thinking something else, like
a long-lived request like John and Doug are saying? They're not pending. They just haven't finished.
But what's the difference? It's either finished or it's not finished, and everything that's not finished is not finished.
The difference is pending might mean you might have to tweak your settings, whereas an in-flight request which just goes on forever, it's just the nature of that request. So from debugging point of view, they matter.
How do we distinguish the two?
Again, based on, if I remember, at least in the Envoy case, there used to be a separate metric for pending, which is basically like if you have reached your maximum limits, for example, and the request can't be queued. Whereas the in-flight one can be, it's a HTTP2 streaming request which goes on for 10 days.
Right. So that's the most obvious one, right? The really long-lived ones which end like up after a while. But in this case, I think they were asking for just normal HTTP 1.1 type requests, which are transactional in nature, but they just wanted to see the concurrency. So okay. I mean, I think we can add one or two new things if two new things are necessary.
Yeah, we can just ask them. I was just asking if there's a difference in your mind between both the two, both the in-flight versus pending.
It would be useful to ask if this assumption about long-running requests is at the basis of what they're asking about.
Yeah. Okay, so we should take an action to follow up.
Right. And actually ask about use case as well, right? Not an experiment, but anyway, right? Okay.
Okay. Let me share this tab. Okay, so Daniel, did you want to talk about WebAssembly and
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about this because I'm looking at the new extension API that has been proposed specifically for WASM extensions, and I'm not entirely happy with the API design. If I got it right, then there was also it was discussed that it will be redone using forward referencing instead of backward referencing. Did I get that right?
Yes, that is correct.
So I just wanted to ask if you had looked in this group, because I'm new to this group, right? I just wanted to ask if you had looked at, for example, how WebAssembly Hub have solved the extension problem, right? What kind of API they have to give people the opportunity to use WASM filters. Was that something that went into the design?
Yes. So I did look at their API as well. Do you?
Okay.
And now, actually, so since you have it here, I would like to know which one of the specific things that you think are relevant, right?
Maybe if I could just quickly share my screen. I tried to prepare something real quick. It's incomplete, but it will help
Sure, please do.
to talk about it. Let me see. Window. Tower screen. Yes. All right. Can you see my screen? Does it work?
We do see your screen, just not the right tab, I think. Okay, now.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. All right. Let me see. How do I quickly go into present? Whatever, I'll just leave it like this. Here. No, it doesn't work. Anyway, so I was just looking at the whole WASM filter lifecycle. So you basically you develop a filter. So this is for a custom filter, right? You develop a filter, you publish it somewhere, you deploy it into your cluster, and then you configure it on the workloads that you actually want to use it with. So this was just a basic idea, because that's something that WebAssembly Hub actually covers from end to end, right? So they have this marketplace where you can actually push your filter, but they also offer you SDKs and Docker images to quickly build your filters. So they cover this whole life cycle. I think for us that's not completely relevant, right? I see us more in this area that we have to support the deployment and the configuration. So we have to help users get their filters into the cluster and configure them to use with their workloads. What the current design does is it focuses on the configuration part, right? It doesn't look at how filters are deployed into the cluster, but instead it just allows you to configure any kind of Envoy filter with any kind of configuration. So you also have to know how to configure an Envoy WASM filter in order to use a WASM filter in Istio. And I think that's a bit too much, because in my opinion, if we're really making WASM filters the extension API for Istio, right, then we should make it a first-class citizen and not require users to know Envoy configuration, or even, in my mind, we shouldn't even be exposing or leaking any Envoy configuration. That's for advanced users, and so where I see this is everybody should be able to, pick up a WASM filter that they learned about in some presentation or at some conference and just integrate it into their cluster without having to read the Envoy docs on how to configure a WASM filter. But that's just my opinion. So I took a look at what WebAssembly Hub does and how they make this easy, because it is really easy. So as I said, they manage the whole lifecycle. They give you a good Docker container to build. They have this like a push command to actually push your filter, and then they also have an operator that will actually make filters available in your cluster, and a custom CRD that allows you to configure these filters and configure them against your workloads. So what that looks like is like this. So they have a filter deployment CRD where you can basically specify which deployment you want to include this filter with. So basically it will match all the sidecars within a specific deployment, and then you can give it a config. That's not the raw Envoy config, that's actually the configuration string that is passed into the WASM module. So that's inside the envoy filter config. There's inside the config field, there's another configuration field, which actually this is what that is. And then they have this own image string, which is from the syntax. It's like a container image, right? So they have that tag, and they have this URL kind of string. It doesn't have a .wasm at the end, but in the end, all WASM modules are just .wasm files, right? So that's what they resolve it to. But they have their own caching mechanisms, right?
Having a little bit of trouble hearing you clearly. I think it's
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay.
Let me see. I don't know. Maybe the mic? No, it should be the built-in mic. What did you look at?
So I think that yeah. So I like we did look at this. At least I did. And if you actually try to map this, so this is doing a backward reference, right? So this is selecting the sidecars or the gateways that this filter is going to be applied to.
Right.
What it does not do, right? And that's what I don't know how much. So what this does not do is it doesn't let you order filters. It doesn't take care of any dependencies, right? So
Right.
so this tells you nothing about where it's deployed, what exactly it's doing. So I think I agree with your point that we can make it. We can kind of abstract away some of the excess boilerplate stuff that someone who wants to configure a WebAssembly filter needs to do. However, at least the way I look at it is that it will be good to have a uniform API that can configure WASM filter, XDOT filter, Lua filter, and anything else that a customer wants to configure, because the other
Isn't that Envoy filter?
So we're trying to make Envoy filter better, right? Like, so if you go through the doc, yes. So today that is Envoy filter, and one of the earlier proposals was to have a new API, but it finally compiles down to Envoy filter. But there are many reasons why we don't want to use Envoy filter directly, because it lets you do too many things. So this filter API, so so Envoy filter API as it exists today is a generic XDS patching API, which is too broad, right? Which is way too broad.
Right.
Okay, so the new API.
Well, actually, I don't even think so. I think it's a genius way for advanced users to tweak their Envoy configs on their own terms, right? They might break it, but they can change it.
Yes. So right. So I would not argue about its usefulness. It's just that it is difficult for upgrades. But anyway, so what we need is the restricted Envoy filter API, which deals with filters, right? If you want to do XDS patching, then yes, then use the existing API and like do something else. But inserting filters is a very specific operation that needs ordering. So now, if you put what you just showed in the solo.io's API, it's definitely not complete.
Right. No, I wasn't saying that. No.
But what actually happens is, once you start adding all the things that you need, then you have like two distinct things, right? One is, once you select a sidecar or once you select a gateway, how do you order things and where do you put things? That's kind of one concern. And then how do you select a sidecar or a gateway? That's other concern. So the second concern is selection of a gateway or sidecar can be done through forward or reverse references. And now we are kind of moving towards forward references because that's how that's how other things are moving as well, right? So, but we can treat that orthogonally. So those mechanics, I think, making it easier still for WebAssembly users is still possible, and we can most certainly layer an API on top of that extension API, which so either layer an API or offer tooling, because if you look at how many fields can be elided, it's not that many, right? The inner proto, the configuration that is actually directly consumed by the plugin, is something that the end user needs to know.
My question is just, is our goal to enable a WASM filter ecosystem, or is our goal writing Envoy filter v2, and do we have to do both at the same time? Because I think we don't have to. I mean, the WASM filter can be a more specific version of what we were designing or what comes up in this design. But I totally agree that we should do forward referencing, and as the upstream project, we are the only ones who can do it, right? We can change our CIDs to actually reference a filter. Nobody else can do that. So I absolutely agree on that. We should be doing that. But I also think that we shouldn't try to make it too generic, because, I mean, that was the problem with Envoy filter, right? And while that's great and has enabled, for example, WebAssembly up to build on top of Istio, I mean, very easy Envoy filter to inject WASM filters. That's how I do it today, right? That's because Envoy filter is so generic and can do anything, even if it's never been thought of by the Istio developers. But do we really have to do both at the same time? That's the only thing that I wonder. And
Daniel, can I ask a quick question? How? So I get what you're saying about the WebAssembly CRD. It is very simple in terms of selection, and it is focused more around what filter you want to instantiate, rather than everything about Istio. But when they are creating Envoy filters to sequence the filters correctly, how do they know where to slot it in?
they slot it just right in before the Envoy router. Of course, they don't know. Yeah. Right. Okay. We need to have ordering, and in the design, there's some good ideas about that. I'm not saying we should take over the API design. I'm saying we should make it as easy as they do. If I want to install a single filter, and if I have to do ordering, we should enable that. But I don't think we should enable people to use any Envoy filter there is, because that's no longer an Istio extension in my mind. That's custom Envoy config that we don't necessarily need a new API for. At least I didn't know we do.
I don't quite agree with the last part of the statement. I totally agree with the first part of the statement, which is, let's make the simple thing very easy to do. So most of the users don't have to deal with all the complicated nuances. The current Envoy filter API is thoroughly and completely broken, however majestic it might be. We need to provide a better alternative. Now, that better alternative will be a generic one, like Mandar is saying, but we can abstract away some of those things so that the simple cases just work. I feel like we are all in agreement here, unless I'm not understanding it.
No, absolutely.
I think that Daniel, you're so from what I'm reading, you really want the focus on just the WebAssembly extensions, because you believe that is going to make things a lot easier, right?
I just think we're mixing two different goals in one API. I think we don't have to write a generic API that can do everything if what we really want to do is enable people to use WASM filters easily. And I can live with having a new generic API. I think it's great, but it's not necessarily required for people who want to use WASM filters. So what I'm saying is, and I already put this in the design doc actually, is I can absolutely live with this design. If we do forward referencing, that's even better. But what I would like on top maybe would then be a CRD that is specifically about WASM filters, and that, where you don't have to specify the UDPA name of the filter, you don't have to specify the filter config blob, but that actually is type safe and it's for WASM filters, right? And then if you start doing that, you could later extend it to, if we want to have Lua filters as a first-class citizen, maybe we'll have a CRD for Lua filters as well in the long run. And they could share some of the ordering logic, but they could be type safe for the things that are important to that filter. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, I think that's fair. So my question, I think, on that comment was how many things need to be specialized, and the only thing that I could think of that needs to be specialized is the UDPA name, and creating a whole new filter for UDPA name seems. So actually, let me back up. I think that in principle, yes, it does make sense to have something simpler and something that's more focused. We can layer it on top of the extension APIs because we need the extension API to configure even our own telemetry, and we need it. So the way customers use it is that they let some people use like XDOT, they let some people use Lua and WebAssembly extensions, and for them having a single way to do all that actually does make sense. So that is also a motivation in having just one unified way to configure all these things. So I agree. We can certainly layer it.
And Daniel, is generic API with reasonable defaults, does that meet your goal, or is it still too complicated?
No, it's not about complicated. It's so I just think as soon as we leak the Envoy config, then we're giving up on this chance to actually have these things as first-class citizens, right? If we want to push for WASM to be our first-class extension API, but then we say to people, look, you just have to configure it. You have to know the UDPA name of an Istio HTTP WASM filter, of an Envoy HTTP WASM filter, and then you have to know, the JSON to configure it. I mean, why? Why don't we make it a first-class citizen? That's what I would wonder as a user. If we are trying to push that, then we should do that, I think. And I think they can share code. As you said, it's just a layer on top. If we have the generic solution, we can make the WASM filter a specialized instance of that. But we could also develop them in parallel and share the code later, right? So you could implement the WASM part probably much quicker because you only have HTTP and network and listener filters than the generic part, maybe. I don't know. No, actually, it's probably the same amount of work. That's not correct. But yeah, I'm just trying to decouple these things that I don't think necessarily have to go together.
Yeah, I think layering makes sense in my mind at least, and like we all agree. And if we have to layer it, it does mean I think there is some implicit dependency, sadly. Or we go the route that Daniel, you are suggesting, which is don't think of them as dependent things and start development at the same time. I will leave up to Doug and Mandar, but I still prefer layering in this case.
Yeah, I think I agree about the layering. I feel like we're still so early in this, trying to get the extensions API sorted and then figuring out where its shortcomings are makes some sense to me. I don't know, Daniel, if that's not the answer you're hoping for, or you think that's the wrong approach, but I worry that we might design 3 APIs that overlap or don't cover the right bits all at the same time as we try and figure this stuff out.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think the design of these should go hand in hand, and you can't, design the WASM filter API and then later on you build the extensions API and figure out that the ordering has to change, and then you have to change the other API. I think that's correct. And also, I think this is the second time I'm attending this work group. I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do, but I'm just looking at the wasn't filter game, and I would really like to help build an API and also implement it. And that's just that's also just my thoughts when I looked at it, and I had experience with the WebAssembly stuff, and I thought, can't we get closer to what they're doing? Be more user friendly.
Oh, absolutely, and I think a lot of us are eager to get there as well. And don't worry about only being here twice. All input is good input, right? So we're looking for more attendees in activity, and we'd love to help.
All right. So my next question would be who's working on the forward referencing part of this? Is there any active work going on, or should I start a doc?
Yeah, so I'm working on the forward reference. So basically tying together the ordering part with the forward references.
Cool. So if you have anything that you want to share with me, I'd be happy to collaborate.
Okay. All right. I will. And there is.
And this is absolutely something we want sort of tied down in this time frame. So the more collaboration, and if we could get something out sooner for review, the better, I think.
Yeah, and it looks like Daniel, if you have some requirements in your higher level APIs that you think are not being met by Mandar's extension APIs, this will be the perfect time to do it. Right. So even if we don't deliver at the same time in 1.7, we know that the APIs will be compatible.
Sounds good.
I couldn't find Daniel's Gmail or Google ID to add him to a doc, or just to tag him to a doc. So if you can just put it here, that would be great. Thanks. Thank you.
So Mandar, another just quick question before we go back to Doug's notes here. Are we thinking of lowering the extension API's output to Envoy filters to start with, or are we actually going to do the conversion in the control plane?
No, I think we should do the conversion in the control plane. We in the again, in a prior version of the proposal, we had said that we want to just materialize it as an Envoy filter API, but now is the perfect time to step away from it and get into something that's completely new.
Makes sense.
There is a specific thing which I would like to draw everyone's attention on, is that the need for having clusters that are matched against an extension, right, is one of the reasons why Envoy filter API kind of co-evolved with being able to define a cluster and the extension. That is not being handled by the API today. So that remains. There are several ways to think about it. One is that many of the filters actually just take the actual endpoints as inputs, so that they don't need an extra cluster to refer to, right? So for example, Xauth API now just takes what you want to call as a direct input, so that you don't need to define a cluster and then refer to it by name. And that's certainly an option of asking the extensions to not use cluster, but just get the input of what they want to have, and then that's it. Otherwise, we will have to have some other way in Istio of defining a cluster. So
that's a really good point, because as far as I know, in a wasm filter, you can only connect to Envoy clusters. You can't circumvent that.
So we actually have code where we define a gRPC service inline as well, and I believe that in Stackdriver we are already using that. So it's definitely an option, like cluster or no cluster. But then we may have to add an API, or I mean maybe service entry is that API, but that part remains to be fully fully explored or
So,
fully solved.
Mandar, can I? So, is it true to say that the extensions API is only for configuring listener filters? Is that fair? And then all the cluster level configuration will need to happen from some other API.
That is correct. Yes, but so okay. I'm which is why I mentioned it. We these are two separate streams of work, but the cluster is important, and if we need to support it, then again we can either continue using Envoy Filter API to add a cluster, or have just a better API to add a cluster, right?
I think that's reasonable.
Right. So I think it's fine separating it, but I wanted to make sure everyone understands that is something that we need to solve.
Yeah, you're basically saying we can't just replace Envoy filter tomorrow once you have the extensions API, basically, right?
That's right. Correct.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
So,
okay. Oh, go on.
So the the last one, I think someone was going to present it, and I added it on their behalf, but I don't think he's here today, is he?
Do you know who it was? At all?
Let me just check. Actually, let's. So the bottom line is that the proposal is to use the open census tracer and expose everything that the open census tracer does. So today we only use it for Stackdriver, and we use the native Zipkin tracer for everything else. But the open census Zipkin tracer already is like better in some respects. And someone posted a message on the channel with a fairly detailed kind of POC of what it would take and what are the advantages, and it seemed great. And then we also saw that there was the bug that Doug is just fixing, which is another encoding issue with the Zipkin client implementation in Envoy. So all that is pointing towards we should just support open census Zipkin properly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Is that? Do we think that that's the path forward? Because there's someone else who's looking for native Jager tracing, right? Do these all align? I've lost track of all the things that open census tracer supports in C++.
So that is the dynamic.ot, right?
Well, so there's that part too, yeah. Do we want to add support for that?
I mean, personally, I'm not sure that would be a good route because, I mean, the Jager project is moving over to telemetry clients. So, I mean, that's still maybe 6 months away. But I don't think the native Jager C++ client has as much support.
So you would still think that using open census tracer is generally a good way to go, right? Because there is, open sensors will become open telemetry, and there is stuff ahead of it.
Yeah, as long as there's no issues with the Zipkin data that it's producing, so it's compatible with what we have now.
Right. So I think
probably
So I think validation and testing is kind of the main effort. We have to make sure that there is no change in behavior between the two. But what we can do is we can introduce it as an option in 1.7, and then if everything goes well, we can just move it to. We can just change the defaults from native Zipkin to open sensors.
Yeah, and it'd probably be a good stepping stone towards open telemetry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So my only concern is finding the person to do that work. So I believe they said they had a working prototype somewhere.
They do, and I looked at it, and it's very complete and thorough. So I think I'm sure he would like to work on it.
All right. So let's take an action to follow up with and get that prototype in.
Yep.
Once we make this default, Gary or Mandar, I'm assuming we can still use Jager backend. It doesn't matter, right? But
correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else anyone wanted to bring up while we're all here? Any concerns or anything else worth mentioning? I guess I'll throw out just a small brief mention here. I'm working actually with John Howard on just streamlining some of the setup for metadata for telemetry and VMs. So I don't know, next time we meet, there'll probably be a doc to review for that. So just a heads up. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to share.
I wanted to ask about Moderator Exchange and how to make it work when clients are not in the mesh. If any of you have any ideas, other than creating another metadata server like Mixer.
Well, get that information from Pilot. Pilot is the metadata server. Pilot knows everything. So that was one of the half-baked proposals that we had. It's more work than it sounds, but
when you say get it, as in the control plane will somehow seed that information via Envoy config, or you're saying make a out of process call?
No, but create a separate channel where you can request this information. So it would be a new XDS resource, a new XDS metadata resource, if you will. And then if you can't find something, then you go and ask Pilot to reverse map an IP address or whatever else it is, right? And
then does this proposal involve having Istio agent be a cache for endpoint metadata?
No, Istio. Well, I mean, at least in what I'm describing, no, there was no Istio agent involved. It's just purely between the proxy and the control plane. It's like I have this. I have this IP. I don't know what it is. I need to reverse map it, and who all can reverse map it? Who has this information? So control plane does, or an extra server does. So I mean, those are the two broad options, right? Either stand up a new metadata server, or use the control plane.
I guess what? Go ahead, Doug.
I say the only reason I was mentioning a CO agent is because I feel like I've heard from multiple places now that we're adding like MCP over XDS kind of technology into CO agent. So a CO agent's going to be doing similar types of things for other bits of information, and so maybe it would be easier to have that sort of live out of the proxy but close. But I don't know. What are you going to say, Niraj?
I think the solutions that both of you are saying are essentially the same. You can move that information to whichever entity in the architecture, and once you move it to pilot, you can have a cache in the agent, or you can have the agent do all the work and have the cache somewhere else if needed, right? So I mean, I guess that we can discuss implementation if this is actually something that we want to do. I'm still not convinced that this is something that we should do. That as in go with this approach. It feels very expensive.
Yeah. Do you have an alternative?
Yeah, more I think alternatives are welcome.
I know, that's why I'm putting my. I know, like I've been thinking about it for a while, and I don't have a good answer.
Yeah.
Okay. We go ahead.
So having there is a slight advantage in having like a look aside one, right, which is not the control plane as well, because that thing is actually like dead simple, right? It really doesn't do much. So making an asynchronous call to resolve a few things or reverse resolve a few things is not that hard. Now we have a DNS proxy. Didn't we add some DNS thing to pilot agent recently?
We did.
Yeah. So we can do like DNS reverse lookups and stuff like that, and then use the extended DNS format. That's also an option. But again, I don't think it's just a different type of transport, I suppose, right? I mean, if you want, you can just make an HTTP call and get the information. So there is no good value in using DNS to get the same.
I agree. I think, sorry, there's some noise in the background. I think if we are stuck with doing a reverse lookup, I don't think DNS will add much value there. I mean, going through the DNS proxy route, you just have to get that information from somewhere, K8 server or another entity. All right, I'll think more about it. I know Doug assigned me this ticket in GitHub. I just don't know how much of an effort this is, to be honest.
Right. I think Neeraj, you raised it to P0 in 1.7, so.
Right, we share equal blame for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm asking. It's just that my raising was that now when we don't have the client in the mesh, I'm like, how much useful information is conveyed, right? Do we convey any useful information from the server side for metrics?
No, I think everything is unknown or unspecified. So there's almost no useful information.
Okay. Well, I'll keep thinking about it, and if I get some chance this week, I'll write an RFC, I guess, and I'll bring it up.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything they want to mention in the last couple minutes here, or shall we adjourn? Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for your input, and talk more over Slack, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Doug.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.